Right now, there's a train flying through solid rock at nearly 250 kilometers an hour, with more than a mile of mountain pressing down from above. No windows, no phone signal, no dramatic announcement. Most passengers don't even look up. And that's what makes it unsettling. Because this isn't just a tunnel, it's part of a system so precise, so obsessively engineered that an entire country runs on it like clockwork. Trains arrive within minutes, missed connections feel rare, remote villages high in the mountains never get cut off. Landscapes that should divide people somehow pull them closer together. So the real question isn't how Switzerland built one of the most advanced transportation networks on Earth. It's why almost no other country has been able to copy it. And once you understand what Switzerland had to fight against first, that answer starts to get uncomfortable. Because on paper, this country shouldn't work at all. At first glance, Switzerland looks like a country designed to fail. Massive mountain ranges slice it into isolated pockets. Deep valleys separate communities by language, religion, and culture. German speakers clustered in the north, French speakers in the west, Italian speakers in the south. For centuries, these groups didn't feel like one nation. They barely felt connected. And geography made sure of that. Before modern infrastructure, crossing the Alps wasn't just slow, it was dangerous. Entire regions could be cut off for weeks or even months. Winter storms shut down passes. Trade routes collapsed without warning. Political unity was fragile at best. In many ways, Switzerland wasn't really a country. It was a collection of fiercely independent regions forced to share a border. Most nations in this situation did the obvious thing. They expanded outward, found flatter land built around natural barriers instead of fighting them. Switzerland didn't have that option. They were boxed in by mountains and powerful neighbours. And if they couldn't move through the Alps, they risked becoming irrelevant, a forgotten patch of rock sitting in the middle of Europe. So instead of going around the mountains, they made the most reckless decision imaginable for a poor, divided country. They decided to go straight through them. And what followed would permanently change Switzerland's future. Digging through the Alps wasn't innovation, it was desperation. Early Switzerland didn't have cutting-edge machines, massive budgets, or generations of engineering experience. What they had was pressure. If they couldn't connect north to south, Europe would simply route around them. Trade would bypass the mountains, power would flow elsewhere, and Switzerland would be left behind. So they started digging anyway. But here's where it gets worse. Workers attacked solid granite with primitive tools, inch by inch, deep underground. The air was thick with dust and smoke. Explosives misfired. Cave-ins happened without warning. Lungs filled with soot. Some workers never made it back out. Official numbers were quietly recorded, then buried beneath patriotic posters celebrating progress. To the outside world, these tunnels were framed as engineering triumphs. Inside Switzerland, they were sacrifices. Entire communities watched fathers and sons disappear into the mountains each morning, not knowing if they'd return. And still, the digging continued. Because these tunnels weren't just about convenience, they were about survival. Switzerland realized something most countries never had to face. If they could punch a hole through the Alps, they wouldn't just connect their own people, they'd connect Europe itself. Suddenly, this small and fragile nation had leverage. If trains could move through Switzerland faster than around it, the Alps would stop being a wall and start being a gateway. Germany, Italy, France. Trade between empires would depend on Swiss tunnels, and once Switzerland proved it could carve through mountains, it became impossible to ignore. By the time Switzerland planned the Gotthard Base Tunnel, this wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about obsession. This tunnel wouldn't snake through the mountains like the older ones. It would go straight through the base of the Alps. No scenic climbs, no dramatic curves, just a perfectly flat line carved beneath more than 2 kilometers of solid rock. 57 kilometers long, the longest rail tunnel ever built. But listen to this. At its deepest point, there's enough mountain above you to crush skyscrapers. Trains rip through at speeds that would have sounded ridiculous just a generation earlier. And somehow, inside all that pressure and darkness, everything feels normal. No fanfare, no announcement. You enter, you exit, and life goes on. That's the genius of it. The Gotthard Tunnel isn't meant to impress you, it's meant to disappear. The mountain becomes irrelevant. Distance collapses. What once took days now takes hours, and most passengers barely realize they just passed beneath one of the harshest landscapes in Europe. But here's what people miss. This tunnel didn't just change how Switzerland moved, it changed how the country thought about movement itself. Speed wasn't the goal anymore. Reliability was, precision, predictability, and that mindset spread far beyond the tunnels. Because carving through mountains turned out to be the easy part. Keeping an entire nation moving in perfect sync was something else entirely. Switzerland didn't win by building the fastest trains. They won by making time predictable. Instead of chasing high-speed rail headlines, planners asked a quieter question. What if every train in the entire country arrived exactly when people expected it to? That idea became the backbone of everything. Every major station is locked to the national clock. Trains pour in just before the top and bottom of the hour. Doors open, passengers transfer, and moments later, everything leaves again. Miss one connection and another one is already approaching. This rhythm repeats across the country all day, every day. But here's where it gets interesting. It sounds simple, it isn't. To make this work, Switzerland redesigned routes, rebuilt segments of track, and sometimes spent billions just to save a few minutes. Not to go faster, but to arrive at the right moment. That's what breaks other systems. Most rail networks are built around individual lines. Switzerland built theirs around synchronization. Buses, mountain trains, and regional lines are all timed to feed the same national pulse. Even tiny villages align with it. The result is eerie in its efficiency. For most trips, transfers take less than 10 minutes. Delays don't cause chaos. The system absorbs them. The country doesn't rush, it ticks. But there's a catch. A system this precise only works if people behave precisely too. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can copy Switzerland's tunnels. You can study their timetables. You can even buy the same trains. Without the people, it fails. In Switzerland, punctuality isn't a suggestion, it's social glue. People arrive early without being told. Platforms clear quickly. Doors close on time. No one argues that the train should wait just a little longer. Independence is expected from a young age. Kids ride public transportation alone. Teenagers cross cantons for school. Elderly residents in remote villages rely on buses that arrive exactly when the schedule says they will. And by law, they have to. Every village inhabited year-round is entitled to public transportation. It might be a train, a bus, or a gondola clinging to the side of a mountain, but isolation isn't allowed. Mobility is treated as a right, not a luxury. That trust changes everything. People respect the system because the system has never abandoned them. And the system works because people don't abuse it. There's an unspoken agreement. Follow the rules and everything functions. Break that agreement and the clock starts slipping. Which raises a disturbing question. What happens when a system this precise faces real instability? For decades, Switzerland's infrastructure wasn't just designed to connect people, it was designed to be destroyed. Hidden inside tunnels, bridges, and highways were demolition points wired with explosives, not as threats, as contingencies. If an invading army ever tried to move through Switzerland, the plan was simple: collapse the infrastructure and turn the Alps back into a wall. But that wasn't the most unsettling part. Even the same tunnels that now feel effortless were once part of this strategy. Thousands of weak points were quietly installed, bridges designed to fail on command, roads that could vanish overnight. The system that unified Switzerland could, in an instant, fracture it completely. Neutral, but never unprepared. Eventually, the explosives were removed, or at least that's what the public was told. But the mindset never left. Everything is planned, everything has a backup, nothing is trusted blindly, which brings us to the threat Switzerland can't demolish or schedule away. For all its precision, Switzerland's system depends on something that's becoming less reliable: the mountains. Much of the rail network runs on gravity-fed hydropower. Water stored high in the Alps flows downward, spins turbines, and quietly keeps the country moving. Clean, stable, perfect. Until it isn't. Glaciers are shrinking, snowfall is less predictable, reservoir levels fluctuate. Engineers now plan for summers when water may not meet demand. The same mountains that once guaranteed stability are becoming a variable. At the same time, maintaining perfection gets more expensive. Tunnels age, timetables tighten, housing near transit hubs becomes unaffordable, pushing workers farther from the system they rely on. And there's a human limit too. Living inside a perfectly synchronized system can feel suffocating. Efficiency leaves little room for improvisation. Missed connections feel personal. Precision becomes pressure. The question isn't whether Switzerland's system works, It does. The question is whether something built on total reliability can survive an era defined by uncertainty. Switzerland didn't defeat its geography. It submitted to it. Instead of fighting the mountains, they carved through them. Instead of chasing speed, they disciplined time. And instead of relying on force, they built trust. Slowly, deliberately, and at enormous cost. Those tunnels aren't just shortcuts through rock. They're promises that no village will be abandoned, that schedules matter, that if you follow the rules, the system will catch you. But that's also why this model doesn't travel well, because it only works when everyone agrees to move together, when freedom means coordination, not chaos, when precision feels reassuring instead of controlling. So when people ask why other countries don't copy Switzerland's trains, they're asking the wrong question. The real question is whether they'd be willing to copy Switzerland's mindset, and whether living inside a country that runs like a clock would feel like freedom, or something much closer to control. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you've made it this far.